Hey everybody, we're going to try this again. The last video I've been waiting for this Sergeant Blackow to show up to report misconduct from two officers here in Tarpon Springs, Florida. Today's audit, we were doing what's called a sign holding audit. And when we do sign holding audits, we were looking to protect the freedom of speech in writing on the public right of way. And a lot of times city officials will draw up ordinances or other penal codes to prevent aggressive panhandling or accosting of citizens or traffic flow issues such as impediment of traffic. In Tarpon Springs, our auditor was standing on the right of way, private property, at the exit of Publix parking lot, which is located by Route 19 in Tarpon Avenue. And what was going on there is immediately two officers in one squad car pulled up and explained to him there was no panhandling permitted within the Tarpon Springs city according to their Muni code. We know that panhandling is solicitation, and our signs are never meant to solicit, nor do they have any language that would imply solicitation in any way, or begging. That we are auditing for the purposes of protecting civil rights. So our auditor explained to him that he's not panhandling by any definitions, and the officer said that all holding of a sign, any activity holding a sign, falls within the Muni code definitions of panhandling within Tarpon Springs. That is incorrect. Within the Muni Code of Tarpon Springs, they have intentionally designed the law to not violate civil rights. The language says that the intent of this ordinances against panhandling are not to stop lawful, rightful begging, panhandling, or solicitation, but to stop things like accosting of citizens and traffic flow issues. So here's Officer Bacall. All right, how you doing?
Good.
So here's Sergeant Bacall.
Right.
Hey, how you doing? How you doing, Sergeant? So what happened? We're auditors and we travel across America, and what our purpose is to protect civil rights. Civil rights in many different cities around America, they're trying to deal with panhandling problems, quote unquote. Same thing in Tarpon Springs. There was a city ordinance that was designed to limit accosting of citizens, traffic flow impediment problems, things that are obviously something that would be within the rights of any city to control. What it specifically says within that Muni code is that they are not attempting to stop lawful panhandling, rightful begging. Yes, I can bring up the code for you if you have a problem remembering the language.
Right here.
Great, okay. And that's actually...
I have the soliciting ordinance and the prohibited acts.
Right. So solicitation is defined as begging or asking for an immediate reward, or soliciting goods, and there's definitions of soliciting that go back to Black's Law as well as Muni Code. And in your Muni Code, there was a long discussion about Tarpon Springs doing an analysis of panhandling problems, and this is let me pull up this for you. So we would never engage in panhandling. So we hold signs that are a statement sign. They might say smile. They might say I love you, or Jesus loves you. Sometimes I'm a pastor at a church, so sometimes that's where it started at. Okay. And we hold signs that are of various types. Some are printed by fast signs. Some of them are on cardboard. Sometimes we're wearing our suits and ties, and sometimes we're wearing tie-dye. And the purpose of our engagement in this activity is to find out if police officers on the beat are respecting the rights of people who hold signs and not coming against that. In this case, our auditor was holding a sign that said "Lost Home." There was a fire in California that burnt down our entire town. And so that's what led us to starting over in life. And when it comes to housing,
should have raked the forest.
I guess some people believe we should have raked the forest. Yeah, it is, but you can't rake a forest with trees that are 35 feet wide. And the key about it is that Tarpon Springs, which is a beautiful town, my stepfather lives here and has for many years. It has a great police department. It has a great art community. It has a great community of people. So I speak wonders about Tarpon Springs. In this case, he's holding a sign that said "Lost Home." It's a statement. He's not asking for any donations. If he received donations, the only person who could impede traffic would be the person stopping to give him a donation. But that's not what happened. There is no donation being received.
It's red half the time.
Were you guys at a stoplight or were you guys at Publix?
He was at a stoplight at the exit.
Publix. At Publix exit has a stoplight, right?
So you were over by Tarpon Avenue?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's Tarpon Avenue. in the grass. When I looked it up on the Onyx Hunt, which is the auditors, it's a hunting site to show you where property and parcels are. He was actually within Public's property, and then he's also on the right of way. So he moved back and forth right there. So that's the X.
Right.
But what this officer told him was completely misconstruing the ordinance. He said, "I'm not panhandling. I'm not soliciting." And the officer said, "Holding the sign." Make sure you quote this right. You were there, so
He
you.
said holding the sign is still illegal unless you have a permit. Of any kind, a sign, period.
We know that's incorrect. But a lot of times officers do say things to try to accomplish a goal. And the goal is to try to move the panhandler along.
Yeah.
And we understand that. But it's one of the most vulnerable sectors of society are the poor, the disheveled, the homeless. And when we're talking about behavioral profiling versus appearance profiling, is a very touchy subject. Martin Luther King once said, I hope one day we'll be judged by not by the color of our skin, but the content of our character. And that is specifically delving into behavioral profiling. And I hope that we won't be judged by the clothing we wear or the type of sign that we're holding, but rather by the conduct. It's over. It's at the house.
Okay.
I mean,
and what does it say?
Lost
It says
home.
Lost home.
Lost home in California wildfire.
Okay.
Yeah, the California wildfire smaller. I don't think you could read that, but it's lost home was in rebuilding from scratch. Is written right on the bottom. Rebuilding from scratch.
So what did the officers tell you?
He told me that I wasn't allowed to panhandle in the city. I told him that I'm not panhandling, that I'm holding a sign raising awareness about the California wildfires. I mean, I get people all day will ask me about them, where I come from or where we came from. And since I told him I wasn't panhandling or soliciting, because at the time I didn't know that the law protects that as well, so it would have been false anyway.
Yeah. Well, there is a sign ordinance, but it doesn't actually apply if you're holding a sign, depending on what
That's
it
when
is.
it's in the ground.
Yeah.
That's why they hire people to
Yeah.
Liberty Tax hires people.
Right.
And you never see a cop tell them to
Yeah, we've noticed
and
that.
they are
Please-
soliciting.
oh,
They're
sorry.
trying to get more
Yeah,
business.
there's a kind of sort of a loophole for that, because it's actually a live person holding the sign.
Yeah, we were too.
Thankfully, we don't have too many of them, but yes, you're right. It's not so much they're soliciting; they're actually advertising, and that's how there's a little work around it.
Because they're not getting a reward immediately. They're trying to reward the company
And
who
it's
has
attached to the business who is licensed.
Right.
So it's one of those things that it's kind of confusing, and even this statute in and of itself really isn't confusing because it's pretty well worded.
Yes, it's very
But
well worded.
what happens is they conflate the sign ordinance, the panhandle ordinance, and I think even though well intended, maybe poorly executed.
Right.
Because if your sign is just a statement, that's not soliciting.
Correct.
Now, as long as you're not in the roadway or stuff like that, the only issue I can see an officer getting a little confused is if, even though it's an awareness sign, for lack
Correct.
of a better term, if somebody comes up and says, well, here, put this, let me give you some money towards.
That's actually
your
they
efforts."
commit.
And what happens then is if the officer observes that, on its face, it'll look like soliciting.
I can agree with that.
Until he gets up and talks to you. And there's really nothing that says, well, you can't prohibit people from donating.
Well, actually, in Ukiah, California, since they have so many homeless or people who are, you didn't want me to bring this up, but I'm going to because I think it's great to educate across America both ways. That is what's in the ordinance, and it's drawn up that you can't, a motor vehicle cannot hand over something to a pedestrian.
Yeah, we got
Okay.
something similar.
So,
As it relates to
yeah.
motor vehicles.
Yeah, and that's under the motor vehicle code, pedestrian code, two different things. So there have been places that we've found that they have written it in a way that didn't violate the rights of a sign holder, but yet it does restrict the action of panhandling.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to say, fair game, everyone can panhandle. That's not what we're trying to do. We just want to make sure that.
No, you want to make sure people color in the line.
Correct.
So, did he take any enforcement action? My understanding is he didn't.
No, because I
Didn't
told him that since I had no phone and no way to confirm or deny what he was saying, that I would give him the benefit of the doubt
Right.
and go find out, which we did. And
Well,
I
that's
told
good.
him
That's
that
a good
after
answer.
that, if I am in the right, then I will go back to doing what I was doing.
Well, you're right, and you're partially right. As far as the soliciting, it's not a violation of the soliciting statute.
Yes, sir.
The only hiccup you're going to have is if you're on Public's property.
And then Publix asked me to leave.
Publix can say, well,
Happens
Publix
every
can
now
do
and
it directly, or they can do it through us vicariously because we have trespass authorization for that plaza.
Well, I've read that. So there's a letter, and I've read this letter, and what it has to do with people who are committing crimes and
Well, you can be
sort.
trespassed for anything, as long as it's not based on, your color, your sex, your religion, that type of thing. So if Publix just didn't want your patronage, or Tarpon Square just didn't want your patronage, as long as they don't base it because, you got blonde hair and blue eyes, then it's okay. They can trespass you.
Right.
You can basically, they can refuse service to anybody as long as it's not.
Now,
violating
Publix
the law.
actually doesn't own all that property.
No.
Yeah.
Publix has their portion of it, but we
Right.
also have what they call a trespass authorization for Tarpon Square itself.
Right.
The whole plaza.
Yeah, I've actually spoke
It's
with the
actually
owners of Tarpon
Mall.
Square.
Tarpon Square is across the street at Walmart.
Tarpon Mall, yeah.
So it's, it's semantics, but as long as he didn't trespass you, which he didn't, right?
No, he did not.
He didn't give you any violations for the ordinance.
Correct.
He basically just misspoke.
Right.
And
But
so
if
gave
he,
you some misinformation.
what we're worried about is if he had not walked away, which was the activity the officer was requesting. So if he had not walked away because he was perfectly within his rights,
Normally, I would not give them my name. And actually, we're dealing with something in court right now.
in Mount Dora for the
Mount
same
Dora,
thing.
where I didn't give them my name until I got to the police department. I mean, they didn't take me to the police department. They took me straight to the jail.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to get bail, so I gave my name so I could get
Yeah,
bail.
I mean, you run into, there's going to be that legal dance where in Florida,
Civil suits.
there is
If you're committing a crime,
Yeah, there's not necessarily a statute that says you have to provide your information unless you become part of an investigation.
Right.
Then the course changes. So I don't know what happened in Mount Dora.
Right.
But the best thing to do, I mean, just friendly advice, unless you just want to take the ride and test the system.
Well, I
it's always
didn't- yeah.
easier just to identify yourself because you got to put yourself in our position. I don't know who you are.
but you don't need to unless there's a crime
Well,
being committed.
Unless
I just
unless
didn't
I have a
feel like-
lawful reason to
Yeah,
stop.
right.
out
I
with
just
you.
didn't feel like dealing with
'Cause-
two civil suits at the same time. So I wouldn't have given them my
Well,
name.
the thing about law enforcement is that they're not trained to be a detective. That takes a lot more training.
Yeah.
So an law enforcement officer is trained to identify criminal behavior and to respond on that on a local level, beat level. When you start to get into investigating people, that typically is reserved to detectives.
Yeah, they're not necessarily investigating the person. It's whatever the incident is.
They usually want to run warrant checks to investigate people.
Well, but see, in order for an incident to occur, there's typically a person involved. Otherwise,
That's true.
You're not going to investigate a tree. So,
Right.
depending on what's going on, it does give them the opportunity to conduct a full investigation. A lot of times, that requires me to know who I'm dealing with.
Right.
Now, if you're just walking down the street minding your own business, and they stop and ask you, you have every right to say no.
Right.
Because if you're not violating the law, ordinance, or statute, then
But we have seen where they had to go to the Supreme Court because
Oh,
there
yeah,
was
no doubt. Look,
a situation. Yeah.
anytime there's people involved, whether they're police people,
There's mistakes
civilian
made,
people,
yeah.
mistakes are going to be made because nobody's perfect.
Well, this time we really were notifying. We're not when I say we want to file a report, this could be definitely unofficial because
Yeah.
there was no grievance. He wasn't taken to jail. There was no serious damages. But we definitely need to educate both the public and officers that we respect the color of law. I absolutely I don't want to see officers having to walk away from auditors because there's no crime being committed.
Help me out there. What are you auditing for?
That's civil rights. In this case, it's First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and Ninth Amendment. But we establish our audit types that would to protect the vulnerable parts of society. And in the last 5 years, we've been dealing with a lot of complaints from homeless individuals that have been complaining about being disparaged or oppressed by officers. So for the last 5 years, we've been focusing on that, what we call homeless crimes. Obviously, that's a very layman's term, but they're crimes that you just don't see in the average public, such as impeding traffic for when there's not impeding traffic, or camping tickets. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when it comes to homeless crime. So we've been focusing on making sure that there's problem everywhere. But that comes back to 2007. I mean, I lost my home first in 2007 when the housing market collapsed. So I owned a landscaping company. It was very successful. We had a contract with both Home Depot and Drees Homes, so we were doing quite well. And then when they stopped building new homes, Pavestone doesn't need me anymore,
Right,
and
couldn't pay the bills, right?
yeah, we couldn't pay the bills. And then I took when we were down here in Florida. I moved to Florida from Ohio. We were down here, and I took a job with a media company that ended up being attached to Raytheon, which is a Department of Defense contractor. And I did that for a number of years during the Obama administration. At some point in time, there was a dispute over budgeting. And so they didn't pay us for quite some time, and we lost our home in Florida. And that point in time, I was emotionally distraught. I felt like a failure as a dad. I felt like a failure as a man, as a husband, and yeah, it's a lot of stress, and I felt myself getting into the dark side of emotions, suicidal tendencies, things like that. It was no good. So what we decided to do was to buy a bus and start traveling the country. This is something we owned. And we could never be homeless again because our home was now paid for, and it wasn't attached by any property value or property assessments that could go up or any taxes and things like that. It was our home and our belongings. And so that's what started this. But when we left, I left the brick and mortar church, very confident that we could cross the country as Jesus, and I don't want to get too much into the religion. Jesus told his disciples, the Son of Man has no place to lay his head, and to follow me. And then he told them, when you go, don't go with any copper, silver, or even 2 pair of tunics. So the ministry of Jesus was laid down as a poor ministry. And we thought that this is something that we could minister across the country and understand what the problems are that we were being told within, at the time we had a shelter. And we were providing indigent packages to people who were homeless. So we were being told a lot of these different things.
In California?
This was in Florida, in Gulfport, Florida, down by Clearwater, or by us, St. Pete. Yeah, and that's something that was going great until one time, and it started in Bakersfield, California. It was when we first had the cops come against that type of ministry. But after that, we started auditing to find out how big of a problem it is.
So is it the church doing the auditing?
Well, I was a youth minister at the church. We're an advocate group now because the church at first they were not sure what we were trying to do. Okay. I had some of the trustees that said that you're bucking authority, and I was saying, no, we're not bucking authority. We're just trying to show that God's ministry can be done from a cardboard sign. I mean, it can be done by
stop murderers.
Right.
I ain't got time to stop murderers.
So it had nothing to do with bucking authority, but that's I have some older people on our trustee board that didn't like the idea, so we funded it ourselves and through crowdfunding donations, and we started out our own organization, not NPO. It was aside from the church, and that's what we worked on.
And what's it called?
As a 3H, or Houseless Helping Houseless. Okay. So it's not through the church, but it started as a ministry. You got it, like a spinoff. Okay. And yeah, it's been very successful. Like Marianna, Florida, we had to talk to the city manager, and there was a training of the officers, very informal, but it worked. I mean, they were still not having a panhandling issue. They had a little problem when the hurricanes came through. Yeah. And so, but they're able to get things back together pretty well. And there's another one down in Mineola, which is by Claremont, Florida, I think it was. And that city manager was really understanding of what we were doing.
So your mission or your hope is to help educate the police into the homeless matters and the policing.
How it affects our society.
Defend the Constitution.
And defend the Constitutional, yeah.
Well, I can tell you this, we've had many meetings on our level here at the agency regarding homeless issues. And the one thing we've learned is you can't police your way out of a homeless situation.
Right.
And laws can only be enforced when the laws are violated. And being homeless is not a crime.
Correct.
So, we understand that, and I hope my guys embrace that. What's that?
When you're homeless by choice, you're not homeless.
You're houseless, home free. A lot of people say home free.
There's a big portion of those folks out there as well.
They don't typically stay in one place, though.
Right. And you soon get to know who they are because you end up interacting with them more often because, like you said, it's a choice.
The homeless that...
There's drug addicts and alcohol that usually, and I'm not saying that every homeless person has drug and alcohol problems, but we have found in our research that the vast majority of people who stay in one place and don't leave to find a better, more fitting part of America make that choice. And that's not necessarily every time, but it has been the majority, yeah.
There's some people that the system has just broken over and over again. They just feel more comfortable.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Then
you sprinkle in the mental health issues, and there's a severe lack of funding for that.
Right.
So it's no doubt that one of each other are going to crisscross and intertwine themselves.
Right.
There's no doubt. And we see it a lot.
Yeah. And trying to police it has to be difficult. I can't.
It's very difficult
imagine.
Because this is a prime example.
Yeah.
You really weren't doing anything wrong, other than the fact that if the business doesn't want people soliciting, which you really weren't soliciting, but you see the issue it creates. They see a sign.
Yeah.
So they automatically assume you're soliciting.
Right.
And So the officer may have been incorrect in what he told you by definition, but I think what he was thinking is the same thing everybody else was doing. Well, why is that guy standing there with a sign? He wants something.
You know, we saw people
And the
holding
only
a
thing he wanted was
awareness.
influence. Yeah, trying to make.
We saw
aware.
people holding a sign for the Republican Party as a local Republican Party nominee right on the same right of way.
There's a whole nother set of rules for them.
Right.
For the political stuff during political season. So it does get very, very confusing at times. I will make sure that I talk with my officer and go over, what the deal is.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's all we can
thankfully,
ask.
he didn't take any enforcement action, so there's basically no penalty, which
Right.
is good because he didn't deserve a penalty.
But like I said, the property people that own the property, as far as I know, don't have a problem with me because I shop Panera Bread, Publix all the time.
Yeah, we spend money
And
here.
they're
I
like,
mean,
nice to see you. Like, they give me smiles. They see me around.
but we do know Walmart. We were parked for 2 days straight one time at Walmart. We did see a lot of RVs in Walmart, so we assumed there's the only large parking lot in the area.
That's a whole nother issue.
Yeah, and they just didn't want us to be there, and that's fine. And I understand
And that's
that.
a whole other thing that's starting up is you have people who are under the impression that Walmart allows that.
Well, they used to.
And they used to.
Yeah, they used to.
But now, every day is a new story.
Right.
And, I was just talking with someone that says, the simplest solution to that problem is have the landlord post it.
Yeah,
But signs
super
up that
simple.
says, no overnight, and there you go.
Super
There's no
simple.
more ambiguity. Everybody knows what's going on.
And we've noticed that, it used to be, Walmart's not really a retail company; they're a real estate company. They have Walmart real estate, so they buy these swaths of land. And I talked to one that was in Texas. The manager explained to me that he was actually at a meeting with the Walmart corporate when they were building these areas by the garden center for RVs to stay overnight, and they pay $10, and they plug in these solar panels they built there, and it increased. And there was a discussion of the amount of American shoppers that were turning to the roads and using RVs again, like there was in the 60s and 70s.
Right.
So Walmart corporate, the way he explained it, was aware of this dynamic change within the American population that could be beneficial for Walmart's profit.
The longer you're on the property, the more money you spend there.
Makes
You
sense.
So-
need something, you go there.
That makes sense.
So that was when I explained it to a few officers that sometimes you might just be disparaging. Now when I talked to Walmart corporate about that, they said it's from a store to store basis, and the managements make the discretional decisions, which makes perfect sense too.
Sure.
So
ours really wouldn't support that because it's not a super
It's
Walmart.
small,
Right.
too.
It's a
Small
smaller
parking lot.
store, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of traffic.
Right.
There's a lot of traffic in that place, but
it's the only large parking lot that you can park a bus sometimes though.
no. We see it all the time. I mean,
So we do markets most of the time during the week. So we work we have a vendor's booth. We sell gems and minerals at like the flea markets. Webster is a big one that we go to,
okay.
and then but on
you guys get around a
Tuesdays.
little bit.
Yeah, we've been all the way down to Miami and back up. We've been all the way across the country 8 times. So and stopped along the way, different highways, and doing this auditing things, but also just
What's your
living.
favorite part of Florida?
Well, this is one of them for sure. Yeah. Pinellas County is one of them. I mean, Tarpon Springs particularly is one of them. I mean, I like Gulfport quite a bit. Sarasota. Sarasota's got a really cool vibe. It's a Siesta Key area.
I was actually
Oh,
I was born in Tampa General Hospital.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I grew up in foster care though, so the moment I turned 18, I met some hippies and learned that I can go anywhere in this country I want as long as I have feet.
Yeah, we started out as birthright citizens of America. Our parents chose where they wanted to live, and then when we were adults, we choose where we want to live.
Absolutely.
But we have to examine America to find out what society is in
What
time.
better way to do it than go see it?
You got it.
If
You
you
got
don't
it.
experience it, you don't know.
You got it.
And I never went hungry. I never went hungry on the road. When traveling, you don't have to ask for anything.
People are good natured and good
They are.
kind-hearted, I believe.
They are.
I think most people are.
The only time we ever see any discourse is on the media. In
Their job.
yeah.
Stir the pot.
Stir the pot. In society, we very seldom see any. We get along with people who are wearing MAGA hats and people who are wearing Biden hats,
Right.
and we see them together. So we're like, the discourse is really media, and they're looking for that. So,
I won't disagree with you.
but Sergeant, we don't want to take much more of your time. I know you have a lot of jobs to do, and we really appreciate your time in
Yeah,
hearing
no
this
problem.
out.
I'm glad I got to talk to you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll talk with the officer. Like I said, I think it's one of those well-intended, maybe poorly executed
Right.
encounters you guys had.
I agree.
Because he's a good dude.
Okay.
And I have a feeling that, like I said, the impression that he was given was, I need to act on this. But unfortunately, the reality is, not really.
No, not really. Not until there's a problem. Yeah, problems.
Right.
So yeah.
Now, if we get a complaint or something later,
Obviously.
And they come and make contact with you, just understand it, then they probably received the complaint.
Yeah.
Well, most businesses do just confront the person.
Yeah,
most of
Instead
them.
calling the cops, but every now and then.
Every now and then in today's world, they get a little more skeptical,
Yeah, absolutely.
Either way, even if cops are called, I'm like, all
Well, there's
right.
not much auditing to do here anymore. We've talked to the watch commander. You seem very understanding of what's going on, and that's what the audits are about. I mean, if there was a such thing as pass or fail, we call that a pass. I mean, if there's this was a test.
Makes me feel good.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, you're not homeless, but the homeless thing that you are auditing, I can tell you, is a big deal for us.
I'm sure. Sure.
And it's not something that we just,
Probably traveled up from the city a lot too, because you're real close to the
city's
city.
very involved,
Yeah.
and they're very engaged with the police department because, as you know, we have different areas here, the Shepherd Center and the churches, St. Tim.
Right.
They try their best to do as much as they can to be benevolent and help people. But like you said, which you're the first person to ever tell me that most people who make that choice are different than actually homeless people.
Right. And it's hard to decide to
And the
differentiate.
average person doesn't understand that.
Right.
So I give you credit for that. You're way heads and
Well,
shoulders.
if you ever get the chance to sleep underneath a redwood on the ground, with no tent, you'll understand why.
Only if I can meet Bambi in the morning.
The Bambi.
I love being in the woods.
The Bambis out there are mountain lions and bears. So.
My dad lived in California before he passed away, so I used to go out there all the time.
Were you in Central or
He actually lived just outside San Francisco, and my godfather still lives in San Jose.
Okay, we were up by Paradise, where Oroville area. We were right where the fires were.
Yeah.
Mendocino County is where we're at.
That's bad. I feel so bad for those folks.
A lot of people don't know that was federal land that caught fire. It was BLM land that was Department of Interior had contracts with.
Wasn't it arson though?
Some of it was, but some of it was failure to maintain transmission lines. Yeah, and it was the federal government's job to do that with their contractors, and there was a lot of negligence going on there, and it really didn't have to do with the people so much because most of the towns were not victim of the fire. In our case, the Mendocino Complex fire came around. It didn't quite get where the neighborhood we lived in, which is a small little tiny neighborhood, but it burnt everything up right around it, and we couldn't get anything out of the neighborhood. And so while we could have stayed, I guess, and hunkered down, you'd had to really have long-standing roots in that area to be able to work anywhere because of the very few businesses that existed still. There was just no way to exist in that area, and so we had to find other things. I love California, but I came from Florida, and I love Florida, so I appreciate all of America, and this is where my roots are. So yeah,
it's good that you at least got to see the world and understand what's out there.
Right.
Most people never leave within 100 miles.
Where their mom lived. Yeah. Well, Sergeant, I we could talk for hours.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Andrew, Pastor Andrew Stevens.
Ryan, right? Yes. All right.
It is.
Nice
You have a blessed
meeting
day.
You too.
Stay frosty out there, brother.
See ya.
All right, guys, that was a really good meeting with Sergeant Brockel. He was a very understanding guy. I really appreciated that he was able to see the difference between what we were doing and the act of solicitation, especially in a way that might be costing to the citizens. That was one of the most productive interviews that we've done, and in the years that we've been doing audits. Hopefully, he will actually talk to this officer. I do agree with him that this officer probably made the misinterpretation of the actions and activities as being some type of panhandling. He didn't seem to understand that even panhandling passively within the city of Tarpon Springs is permitted according to their immunity code. It is really difficult to get past that because a lot of people don't want panhandling, especially officers. They want people who are in need of things to go and utilize their nonprofit services instead of asking the public directly for donations. And I can understand that. It doesn't mean that it's lawful, but it's one step at a time, man. Baby steps in this case, because it's a touchy subject, and we've been arrested many times trying to teach officers the proper way to police America, and in this case that did not happen, and we were able to present the information to the watch commander without any incident. Pastor Andrew Stevens, Church Common Good, we love y'all. We'll talk to you soon.